What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie The Gorge. Here's a quick synopsis. Two skilled snipers, Levi and Draza, are sent to an unknown location to watch over a gorge that contains a hidden threat. The film stars Miles Teller, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Sigourney Weaver. Standout performances. One thing that I've started to notice about the two stars of this movie is that they have a rare ability to be interesting on film during quiet moments. There are so many brilliant actors out there that rely heavily on dialogue. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy still keep their star power without it. Teller, I remember watching the first half of Top Gun Maverick thinking I was going to get the fun side of him you see in movies like Footloose, but instead it was a very reserved performance where his character Rooster is just silently resenting Tom Cruise's Maverick. And it's that performance that makes the second half of the movie where the two characters come together feel so cathartic. Then with Anya Taylor-Joy, you have Furiosa, where even though she's playing the titular character, she's not given a lot of dialogue, and she's finally unable to release during that final confrontation between Dementis, brilliantly played by Chris Hemsworth. These two actors are able to convey an entire relationship with two characters without blatantly explaining it with dialogue. That shared quality is the thing that makes them the ideal pairing for The Gorge, a movie that wants you to believe that these two are falling for each other despite not being able to talk, and they did that and more. Let's talk about the characters they play in The Gorge. Teller is Levi, a former Marine who is dealing with PTSD and loneliness, while Joy is Draza, a Lithuanian who works with Russia and has real guilt about her profession. I have a very different definition of what a movie star is in 2025 than most people. I mean, most are still going by the old model that a movie star is somebody who you see is in a movie and that's what makes people want to go see that movie. No, I see movie stars as actors who elevate the movies they are in, and that's what these two did in The Gorge. I came to watch this movie because of Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, and they didn't let me down. In fact, they were even better than expected. You could make a case that in most of the movies they are in, Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are underserved by the movies around them, and that says something about those films. But I think it says even more about these actors that they are able to rise above it and still give noteworthy performances. There seems to be an endless amount of debates about these two and their star powers or lack thereof. I mean, Miles Teller was in Top Gun Maverick, but most people give that credit to Tom Cruise and why that movie was the huge success that it was, and we really don't know what the effect of that movie will have on Miles Teller's career. I mean, this is the next movie he does after Top Gun Maverick. It's The Gorge, and the problem is we can't really rate its success because it was on Apple TV+. And then you have Anya Taylor-Joy, who I thought would become an even bigger star after Furiosa, but that movie did not have the success that I believed it deserved. The big question with her is, will she ever be in a movie as popular as The Queen's Gambit? And maybe the answer is her role in the upcoming Dune Messiah. I mean, we just don't know how big of a role she's going to play in that film that's also going to have Timothée Chalamet and Florence Pugh, not to mention Zendaya, so it might be hard for her to shine in a movie that's filled with so many other young stars. I feel in both cases, when it comes to Miles Teller, he was not given enough credit for being in the movie of a certain moment. I mean, Whiplash, all of the recognition went to J.K. Simmons. He's the one who got the Oscar. Then in the big blockbuster Top Gun Maverick, all of the credit has gone to Tom Cruise. I'm clearly biased. These are two of my favorite actors to watch on screen, but I do believe that they are movie stars. They are people who elevate movies they are in. I mean, The Gorge would not be half as good if they were not the ones in it. Miles Teller's next films include Michael, a Michael Jackson biopic, biopic with Jafar Jackson, Coleman Domingo, and Laura Harrier, Eternity with Caleb Turner, Elizabeth Olsen, and Divine Joy Randolph, and Wild Game with Casey Affleck, while Anya Taylor-Joy will next star in Sacrifice with Chris Evans and the Apple miniseries Lucky with Drew Starkey, Timothy Olyphant, and Annette Bening. And with Teller, we also think there's going to be a third Top Gun movie because of how huge the second one was. And there's also talk of him doing a remake of Officer and a Gentleman that I would love to see, because Miles Teller is the exact type of actor you would want to take that role from Richard Gere. What I want from these two, Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, is to continue to work with interesting filmmakers. What I don't want from them is for them to be in a superhero movie. I don't want to see Miles Teller play Batman. I don't want to see him in a Marvel movie. The same goes for Anya Taylor-Joy. Yes, would she make a good Poison Ivy? Absolutely. I mean, maybe in a Matt Reeves' Batman movie, I would like to see her as Poison Ivy. But other than that, please don't do a comic book movie. Continue to make movies like The Gorge and continue to work with interesting directors. It's also worth noting that both of them have already been in two of the worst superhero movies of all time. Miles Teller's was in Fantastic Four, a really bad film, and Anya Taylor-Joy was in The New Mutants, a movie that most of you have probably not seen. I don't want these two to chase movie stardom. I want them to chase good movies, period. The director of The Gorge is none other than Scott Derrickson, who I first became aware of after the first Doctor Strange film, which is one of my favorite Marvel movies. I love the look of that film. It's a perfect comic book movie, and I was super disappointed he did not return for the sequel, but I am impressed with what he's done since. He made the Ethan Hawke-led Black Phone, one of the best recent horror films, which has a sequel on the way, The Gorge, which is a well-made movie. It's visually compelling, and he, as a filmmaker, understood the strength of the film was the chemistry between the two actors. The Gorge has me thinking about the genre of romantic action movies, and two that come to mind are Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and Night and Day, starring Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. And I would deem those two as sometimes fun and entertaining, but also massively flawed movies because they didn't at all take themselves seriously. And because of that, you don't buy into the relationships in them. That's the best thing The Gorge has going for it. No matter how ridiculous you may find the plot of this movie, it is super serious about itself and doesn't treat its characters as part of a joke. And there are other movies in this genre I like. The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and The Lost City with Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock. What's different is those are comedies, while The Gorge is a super sincere movie. So far I've talked about how the movie's strength is the romantic elements. What isn't is the plot of the movie. I would call it ambitious and sort of all over the place, and the movie for me is good in spite of it. There's enough good to overcome the fact that the action element doesn't fully come together. And if you watch this and feel differently, I fully understand. There are movies that only work because of the stars in it, and that to me is The Gorge. It's a movie that came together because of the two actors and the director as well. My expectations for this movie was centered around the fact that it starred Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy and was directed by Scott Derrickson, and those three people did not let me down. Do I think the plot of this movie is absolutely ridiculous? Yes, I do, but I am willing to forgive that fact because there are other elements of this movie that I really do enjoy, and there's enough that comes together for me to say I think this is a good, not great action flick. I also believe what we have here is the best version of this movie, The Gorge. I think the other version of this movie would be really annoying, where instead of the sincerity, you would get the wink-wink comedy you see today in way too many action romantic films. You would get the funny one-liners, you would get all of it, instead of the subtlety you see in this movie, which I really like. The Gorge is just so different from the other romantic action movies that they are giving us, then yes, I think I am elevating it above those other films, maybe wrongfully so, but that's what I'm doing. I'm comparing it against the other films that I've seen within this genre, and I go, wow, I would way rather watch The Gorge again than watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith, than to watch Night and Day, than to watch even The Fall Guy. I think The Gorge is a more interesting movie. The Fall Guy has a way better plot and it's way easier to follow, but I'm not really a big plot guy. I'm a big, this stars Miles Teller doing something I really want to see him do, and Anya Taylor-Joy I think is unbelievable in this movie, how she's able to be interesting without being over the top. You know what it is? I'm talking through this in real time. I just think the movie isn't lazy. It earns its ending when the two characters come together. We know in every one of these movies that the two characters are going to fall in love, and how you feel about that connection at the end is going to be based on the believability of the chemistry of the two actors. And man, do you believe the chemistry of Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy at the end of The Gorge. I was a bit angry at myself for falling for the trap of this movie, going, wow, I actually care if these two characters end up together. I fell for the trap, and I think that is the brilliance of this movie, is that they got me to fall for the trap. Now, clearly, not everyone has fallen for the trap of this film, and I understand that, and I'm okay with that. I don't think this is a universally great movie. I'm okay if you don't like it. I'm just here to say I really enjoyed The Gorge, and I think if you're fans of these two actors, you're going to enjoy it as well, because I think it's just a great showcase of what they're capable of doing as stars. And again, I just believe there are so many worse versions of these kinds of movies. I will listen to any criticism of the movie The Gorge. I know it's imperfect, but one take I really hate seeing is this, that it's just another streaming movie. Like, the idea of a streaming movie is its own genre, which it isn't. If you don't like the movie, that's fine. Just come up with a better reason than because it was made for Apple TV+. For me, The Gorge is better than a lot of mainstream blockbusters, and I keep going back to this. It's because it treats itself and its characters as important that really stood out to me. Most versions of this would be more comedic, snarky, with meta commentary on the culture, and that can be really tiring at times. Its straightforwardness was refreshing. It's not fair to label all streaming movies as one thing. They should be judged on a case-by-case basis. That being said, the real frustration lies in how do you talk about a movie like The Gorge when you really don't understand how popular it is. I mean, Apple TV just announced that The Gorge is now their most seen movie ever after Wolves, the George Clooney Brad Pitt film. I don't know what that means. We have no idea what that means. Does it mean that a lot of people have watched The Gorge in its entirety, or does it mean that somebody turned on the movie on a Friday and did not finish it? I have no idea how in the culture The Gorge is. I have no idea how many people will see this movie. I have no idea what impact it will have on the careers of Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. At least in the old days, when an action movie wasn't getting the respect it deserved from critics, it would win at the box office, and we would go, look, the culture loves this action movie. This action movie will live on because we've all seen it, we'll all talk about it, but now it's impossible to have a real conversation with someone about The Gorge because you don't know if they've even seen or heard about The Gorge. It's inarguably way better to be on a popular streaming television show than to be in a popular streaming movie. I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy really benefited from the wide success of The Queen's Gambit. That show will live on for a long time. I have no idea the longevity of The Gorge. Will it be a movie that we all forget in a month or two? And that's the thing that makes this a never-ending loop of people being like, see, it's just another streaming movie, because they can predict what's going to happen. The movie will be talked about in its first week of release, and then we will never talk about the movie again, so they can say this wasn't successful. And then Apple will come out and say it was successful. We had 400 million eyeballs on it. What are you talking about? The movie deserves to be talked about based on quality and quality alone. And I agree with most people, the quality of the plot is severely lacking. It's incoherent at times. I mean, I didn't care for most of the action sequences this movie had going for it, but what I did care about was the romance between Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. This movie comes down to the chemistry, and that's how I rate romantic movies. That's how I rate romantic comedies. I don't care about the plot. I care about, do I want to care about these two people being in a relationship? And a lot of the times the answer is no, but for The Gorge, I really did care about these two characters coming together at the end. Yes, the action could have been better. I mean, these two have been in better action films than The Gorge. But I would argue that neither has had better chemistry with another co-star than what they had in this movie. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are a perfect pairing, and I hope to see them work together in future films. What I'm doing on this podcast is giving the people who made The Gorge the benefit of the doubt, thinking that they knew that what was special about this movie was going to be the connection between the two stars and the romance. I could be totally wrong. Maybe Scott Derrickson did believe that we were all going to buy into the weird CGI action scenes. Maybe that's what he thought was going to be special about the movie. But I believe he really did know that what this movie had going for it, that most movies don't, was Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. And the people who don't like this movie are not giving this movie the benefit of that doubt. There are strong arguments either way whether or not this is a good movie or not. I'm in this is a good movie camp. I really like the movie The Gorge and think that we got the best movie possible. I think this is very different than the other action movies being made today in modern times. Again, most of these movies would star Ryan Reynolds doing his snarky thing. Well, this movie has real quiet moments between the characters. And Joy and Teller were given the real basics of character building. I mean, they were said, this is a sad guy, this is a sad girl. Hopefully you guys are good enough actors to make us believe that these two are going to come together. And that's what they do. Really, what I'm saying is I've always thought that Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are great actors, but I think this movie is an example of them being a top-tier movie stars. They are really selling everything about this movie. They are why the movie works. And maybe I'm different than most moviegoers in that I don't want every movie to be perfect plot-wise. I want actors to elevate the movies that I'm watching. I mean, I love the fact that you can watch a movie and go, wow, this movie would be so bad if it were not for that one actor. And that's what The Gorge is to me. I think this movie would be terrible if it wasn't starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy or made by Scott Derrickson, who I really do believe is a top-notch director. This movie was the perfect choice for the people who made this movie. Miles Teller is the ideal person you want to be playing Levi. Anya Taylor-Joy is the ideal person to playing Draza, and Scott Derrickson is the ideal director for The Gorge. I'm not insane. I mean, this isn't going to go down as one of the best movies that they make. I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy has been in way better movies. Miles Teller has been in way better movies. Scott Derrickson has directed way better films. But even within this movie, they are able to show you how they are able to make movies differently than other actors and filmmakers. They are able to showcase their abilities and what makes them special. This is the first film from 2025 that I'm talking about on this podcast, and I think it's the perfect first movie to watch for the year. I mean, it's not a difficult watch. It's fun and entertaining and stars two of my favorite actors. I had a fun time watching The Gorge, and I believe that most people would have a fun time watching The Gorge. The first half of the movie is definitely more unique and original than the second half of the film, but overall, yes, I like this movie a lot, and the real test is going to come down to the final scene. If that moment where the two characters reconnect hits you as hard as it hits me, then you are on Team The Gorge, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. However, the one thing I will never understand is watching this movie and leaving it being down on either Anya Taylor-Joy or Miles Teller. Movies need movie stars, and these two people have that it quality. I want to see them dominate movies for the next 20 years or so. I want both of them to be signature faces in Hollywood. I want them to be Oscar-winning actors because I think they're talented enough, and I want them to be in all kinds of different movies. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out The Gorge. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Barry Jenkins's Mufasa the Lion King, starring Aaron Pierre and Kelvin Harrison Jr. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.